Greetings everyone and welcome to today's video. In this show I'll be talking about the Sony HX400V, and what I'll be doing is just showing you all some of the features, the specifications and my opinions on some of the good points, the pros, the cons, and then at the end I'll just show you some sample photos and videos too. So let's crack on with it. I've got it here in the case, so I'll just show you this. And this is the actual camera here. Just take the lens cap off, and that's the strap, but that's not the actual Sony strap. That's just a generic strap that I found purchased on the internet. So as you can see, it looks like a DSLR, but it's not a DSLR. It's obviously a bridge camera, and I purchased this in the UK here for about £340 UK price in March 2017. So it's quite chunky, but it's reasonably lightweight for this type of camera, and we'll get into some of the features right now. If I just turn it on. That's it. So you can see there the size and the shape of it. So first of all, it's got a 20.4 megapixel Sony sensor inside, and that resolves quite a lot of detail, and it's got the Bions processor, which is supposed to be faster for getting all the data off the camera, etc. This camera's also got the Carl Zeiss lens as well, and the thing that I like about it is that it's got a 50 times optical zoom. So if I just zoom that right out now, that will go all the way to 50 times there. You can see how much the lens barrel protrudes out. But what I like is it's got these numbers on the front here, and that actually tells you the focal length you're at. So it's got a 50 times optical zoom, which is incredible really. In full frame equivalent terms, that's actually around about 24 to 1200 millimeter in 35mm format, which is insane really. It's just insane. It really zooms in very close, so you can go from super wide angle to super telephoto just by zooming in and out. It also has a extra fine zoom, extra clear zoom I think Sony calls it, or something like that, and that goes to 100 times. And then you've even got a digital zoom, but I tend not to bother so much with the digital zoom. So that's the zoom lens there. The other thing to note is you can actually use it. It's got a dedicated autofocus and manual focus button, so you can very easily switch between manual focus and autofocus on this camera, and you can just switch that down. And one of the things that attracted me to this camera was it's got a very nice smooth manual focus ring as well. So that's very handy in situations where you want to control the focus yourself, get the exact focus that you need, and that's really handy on this type of camera. You don't often see that. So it's also got the built-in image stabilization. I think Sony calls it optical steady shot, so that helps keep things nice and steady. Even if you think you're being really steady, you're not when you're hand holding. You have to be very careful, especially at lower shutter speeds, and so that comes in really handy as well. This camera, just for your information as well, has got GPS if that's of use to you, and that's on the V model of course, and also it's got Wi-Fi, so you can use apps, which is an interesting feature on this camera, that you can actually download various apps from the Sony Play Memories website. Just log in. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay for, and some are only compatible with certain Sony cameras. But that's quite a handy thing. It's moving more towards the kind of smartphone way of thinking. It's quite progressive. It's the first camera that I've actually seen that you can download extra apps onto a camera, so that's quite useful. And then on the back you've got the EVF at the top, which is always handy on this type of camera, because if you are using the screen in daylight, sometimes it can be very bright and you just can't see what you're doing, so you can revert to the EVF, and it's got an eye sensor, so as soon as you move your eye to or away from it, it will activate straight away. Or you can do that, you set that up yourself manually. It's got the tiltable screen, but not fully articulating, but that's still handy for doing like your low level shots. You can see better what you're doing. Or if you're doing high shots, say you were at a concert, you could hold it up above your head and then you could actually tilt the screen down so you still compose your shot quite easily. So that is a handy feature to have. Also on this camera you've got the mode dial on top here, which has all the usual modes that you expect to find on an enthusiast type of camera. So it's got your program, aperture priority, shutter priority, full manual mode. It's got a scene mode. It's also got 2 custom or memory type modes as well, which is quite useful. You can actually assign common settings. For instance, like me, if you take a lot of wildlife photography, what you could do is set it up in the shutter priority mode, have it set at 1/1000th of a second, something like that, with all the various settings. Go into the menu, press the memory button, and that will save it into either the custom 1 or custom 2 memory. And so that's just really handy if you want to do that as a memory recall. It's a handy little feature that some of you might not be aware these type of cameras have. It's also got a dedicated movie mode as well, so that's quite handy. You can just jump straight in there. The viewfinder and the screen just revert to 16:9, ready for shooting movies, and then you just simply press the red record button at the back to activate recording, stop, start, etc. So that's quite good. Obviously it has got a pop-up flash as well, a built-in flash, so if that's useful to you. Also this camera has actually got a multi-interface shoe. It has got a hot shoe on top. Some bridge cameras or compact cameras don't have hot shoes. Now the reason why I found this useful was, not only can you put your flash guns on, but for me, what I did is I purchased an external microphone because I like to shoot photos and videos. So I purchased this Sony ECM-GZ1 microphone, not exactly cheap, about £70 here in the UK, but it is the Sony one, so I thought go for it. And the good thing is, because this camera hasn't got a mic in port, I thought how can you get around that? So what I did a little bit of research and found this Sony one will just slip straight onto the top, so you have to take the protective cap off and just slip it on the top there, lock it off, and that's good to go. So now I've got an external mic on the top there. You don't need to do anything in the settings. The camera will recognise the microphone straight away, no more settings needed, and you can adjust the microphone level in camera to something like medium or standard, something like that, to whatever level volume you want to, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Now if you're wondering, this little furry bit on top, this doesn't come with the Sony. What I wanted for outdoors was some kind of dead cat or windshield, just to keep the wind reduction. There's nothing more annoying than that sort of rustling wind sound that happens. So what I did, I went round some of the discount stores locally and I found this little squeaky toy for dogs, believe it or not. And what I did, found this, I thought, oh, I'll have a look at that, and I just cut the tail off. Don't worry, no animals were actually harmed during the making of this video. And just this squeaky toy, I thought that might do the job, so I just cut the furry tail off and took all the insides out and slipped it over, and it was almost a perfect fit. As you can see, it actually acts as a little perfect furry dead cat for the microphone. So it's always worth just checking, having a look around, see what you can find to modify these things sometimes. So that's the microphone on top there. Also, just to mention, you've got these ports on the side. One is the multi-port on the top, so that acts for your charger. So you charge your camera battery, which I'll come to in the pros and cons as well later. You've also got a micro HDMI out, so you can watch your footage straight back onto the TV if you want to do that as well. So in terms of movies, you have got, obviously, as I say, this dedicated movie record button and mode as well on the top, and the camera shoots in full HD at 1080, and that's either, the maximum would be, either if you live in the USA it would be 60p, here in the UK it's 50p, and that's the maximum frame rate that you can record in, and that's on AVC HD or MP4 format. And that looks pretty good. The footage is quite good actually. I'm quite pleased with it, and you judge for yourself. You'll see at the end. So yeah, that's why I like this for a movie setup as well. So if you're walking around all day, you can be taking photos. But I've got my microphone now. I can go into the movie mode if I want to, and I can shoot both. I can be out, I can take some photos, I can do movies as well. So that's basically an overview of the camera there. The last thing to mention, which is quite handy, is it has actually got a filter thread on the front, and at the moment I've just got a UV and ultraviolet filter, just really for protection more than anything, on the front of the camera. And I find that quite handy because I also have these filters here. By the way, this is a Sony bag. This doesn't come with it, but you can actually purchase these on the internet for about £20 here in the UK. And you can see it's just a simple design, but it's very well padded, and also it fits the camera in really snug, very nice, no problems at all. But just coming back to the filters, I just keep them in this filter pouch. But what you could do, you can actually use different filters on the front. So I have this circular polarizing filter as well, so that helps just keep if you want good saturation, good contrast for your photos and videos, things like that. And also for filmmaking, which I'm going to do a separate review on this. This is a K&F Concept variable ND filter. So you can use this for photography, for doing like your slow shutter speed type of photography, but you can also use this for video if you want to come off the auto mode and shoot manually. If you want to get more into your videography, you'll understand the shutter angle, that you need to have the shutter speed double the frame rate on your video, and in order to do that on a very bright day it's virtually impossible. Or if you want to shoot with a very wide aperture on a camera when you're shooting video, you can't do it without the use of these filters really, unless your camera's got built-in ND filters, of course, which this hasn't. So what you do is you put the filter on the front and you block out the light deliberately so that you can shoot at the shutter speed that you want and the aperture that you want. So it just gives you a bit more control there. It's a very nice little padded case, again not too expensive, about £10, and that's really good. And then I have one more thing that sometimes I use in the case here, and that's just this little remote control. Again, just a generic one, it's not a branded Sony one, only probably about £10 here in the UK, and you plug that into the multi-port in the side, and that's handy if you're doing any kind of photography or video where you want to just keep everything nice and still, rock solid. You can actually just press that and it's going to keep everything nice and steady. So that's just thought I'd mention that as well. So let's run through some of the pros and the cons of this camera. From my perspective, I shoot, like I say, photo and video, so I have sort of different things that are important to me, but I just run through them just to give you a heads up on what my sort of pros and cons. So some of the pros for me are it does produce nice, sharp, detailed images, and I think that's down to this Carl Zeiss lens. And like I say, this is one of the things that attracted me to buying this camera in the first place, was the Carl Zeiss glass. You know, it's a renowned glass lens manufacturer, so that's one of the first things that attracted me. So it does produce some good punchy, sharp images. It's also, as I mentioned earlier, got a really excellent zoom range. There's not many cameras that you could shoot in one lens from 24mm equivalent or all the way through to 1200. And like I say, if you use the extra optical zoom, that actually effectively doubles it to 2400mm, but you just have to be careful with your shutter speeds, because obviously shooting at that kind of focal length, you've got to try and keep everything as steady as you can. And I will say as well, with the Sonys, I do find the next thing is it has got faithful colour reproduction. So if I'm outside, I usually set the white balance to sunlight or daylight, whatever the setting's called, and that produces some really nice colours, very natural looking. And I always think, you know, it's as I have seen it, as I have imagined it. So greens are looking really good, all your primary colours looking good, and but again, that can be down to personal taste as well. Some people like Canon colours, some people like the Nikon rendering of colours, but I really like this the Sony way, the colour reproduction. The other thing that I'll mention that I did say earlier was about this manual focus ring, and it's very smooth, and you've even got a focus magnifier as well. So what that does, when you begin to focus, it zooms in on the image, crops in, so you can get really fine-tuned manual focus. So to me, that's very handy, particularly for video. I find that very useful. Also, the filter thread is a very good bonus to have as well. It's a 55mm filter thread, for the very reason that I mentioned with those filters. I find that very handy on the front. Just gives you extra options, like I say, for your polarizers and your ND filters. And then the next pro for me is this multi-interface shoe. I'm able to put my microphone on top. It's not really adding much weight or size. It's still a very compact system, I'm sure you'll agree, especially if you're hand holding. That's a very good option to have as well. So I find that very good. And also, the other thing, it has got decent handling as well. The grip's very deep. Everything just feels right. The buttons are in the right place. The mode dial feels solid. You've got all your controls on the back that you need to hand as well. So to me, the ergonomics, which, you know, especially if you are carrying a camera around all day, ergonomics become important. So that's quite important to me. So some of the cons, some of the downsides, I find with the Sony menus, I think they could be a bit clearer. I mean, I've used different cameras over the years, Nikon, Fuji, Panasonic. I find probably the Panasonic to be one of the clearest, probably along with Nikon. But sometimes it just did take a little bit of getting used to. Some of the Sony ways that they lay out things in the menus weren't so clearly laid out, and you're wondering, what does that mean? And it's just a bit muddled sometimes. It's not always the clearest that it could be. However, I have got used to it now, so it's not too much of an issue. The other thing I will mention is that the screen is not touch screen, so that is something that's becoming more and more handy on cameras nowadays. The Panasonics have started to put their touch screens, etc., and it's not fully articulating. It's not a vari-angle screen, it is only the tiltable. So I would have in some ways preferred the full vari-angle screen, but again, you can't have everything. It also hasn't got any slow-mo video option either, so that's not really a feature that's on there, which is a shame. I would have liked that, because just to get that epic, you know, if you could have like 100 frames per second or even 200 at full HD, that would be something that would be really nice. You could just give you that option just to sort of slow everything down. You know, I film a lot of wildlife, so just to get birds in flight or as they're taking off, it would be really nice to have done that sort of stuff, so that's not on there. Another little quirk is that you cannot turn off the image stabilization at all. It's called optical steady shot, I think, on the Sonys, and it's very strange. I've never known this before on a camera, that you can't actually turn the image stabilization off. And you might think, well, what does it matter? But for me, when I've been using it on a tripod, I've found that for some reason you get this, because obviously the sensor is sort of fluid, it's in flux, it's moving as such, if you like. You get this weird kind of drifting, so when I've been filming or trying to photograph something far off particularly, you get this weird kind of drifting, and it's just very odd. I've never known that before, and it just would have been nice when you're locking something down on a tripod. The whole point is you don't need image stabilization anyway, because you're locking it down securely on a tripod. It just would have been nice to have that option, really. The other thing is, compared to other cameras previous to this, I had an FZ200, and on this camera, the Sony, I feel that some of the AF options are a little bit limited, they're a bit crude compared to the Panasonic options. You have got an AF tracking mode, which can be activated quite quickly on this, so that's quite good, but just it is a bit clumsy, and obviously you're not going to be able to access and operate things as quickly as a DSLR, so that's just something to be aware of. I wouldn't say it's the fastest either, you know, it's not as fast and accurate as a top-end DSLR, but this is a bridge camera, of course, so that's different. Now, this camera has got 10 frames per second burst mode, continuous shooting, which sounds good, and it is quite good actually. I've used it. However, the trade-off is that you can only use it for 1 second at a time. 1 second. So you can do a burst of 10 and rattle those frames off, but you can only do it for 1 second, and then the camera has to catch up and write all those images to the card. So just something to be aware of as well, that it's very fast, but only for 1 second, so there isn't much of a buffer there. And the other couple of things that are little niggles are that there is no battery charger included with the camera, which is really annoying. So when you first get it out of the box, you just get a cable that it plugs into the mains, but you have to plug it into the multi-port on the side. So that's a bit annoying, because you have to obviously then wait for your camera. You can't be using your camera. I've since bought a couple of spare batteries, and I bought just a cheap generic battery charger off the internet for about £10, and that's great, that does the job. So now I can keep one in the camera charged, I can go out and use that if I want to, but I'm not having to wait, so I can just leave the other one on the charger charging up. So that's just one other little issue there. And the last thing is, this camera only shoots JPEG, it doesn't shoot RAW, so there's no RAW option on this camera. So that's a little bit annoying, especially if you did want to really push your photography a bit further. But having said that, the JPEGs are very nice anyway, the colours are good, and if you're careful and watch the contrast, you know, you can adjust all that, the contrast, the saturation, you can get away with it a bit more, and try not to overexpose your images too much. You shouldn't have too many problems really, but that's just to be aware of, that there's no RAW option on the camera. So in conclusion, I would say that this is a very good value for money camera. It's very solid, it's a good performer, decent JPEGs, good video image quality, So who's it for? Really, I'd say it's ideal for somebody if you are into your holidays and travel. It's a good all-in-one camera. You don't need to take anything else. You can just carry this one camera. It's going to cover pretty much almost every situation that you'd come across. And also I would say if you're doing wildlife photography on a budget, then also this would be a camera worth considering, because just that zoom range from 24 through to 1200, you know, you can't really find that kind of range in one lens in a DSLR. And yes, of course, it's a smaller sensor, etc, etc, not going to be quite as good with the tracking AF and the burst, etc. However, it's still really decent, and as you'll see from the sample images, hopefully you'll see what a little camera like this can achieve. So that's kind of my conclusion really. It's very good. If I had to give it a score, I'd probably score it around about 8 out of 10, just because it has a very good all-round bridge camera. The image quality is good, like I say, and yeah, overall very pleased with it. Very good. I would say its rivals in terms of cameras, if you're looking to buy this type of camera, would be something like the Panasonic FZ300 or the FZ82 that's come out this year. Look at the Canon SX60 as well, or even the Nikon P900 or the B700 from Nikon as well. They are all similar cameras with similar features, some differences of course, and just a bit of difference in prices there. So that's what I would say to look at in terms of alternatives to this one if you're looking. But this just suited my needs. Other cameras might suit your needs to what you want better. So that's it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed that, and have a look now at the sample photos and videos. Don't forget to subscribe and give me a like. If you've got any comments or questions about this camera, or you own this camera, what do you think about it? What's your opinion? So let me know in the comments below, and have a good day, and I'll see you next time.